Makola Gardens shines like a small city. Lanterns sway in the warm Accra night. A highlife band hums and the bass walks slow under the chatter. Men in bright Kent lift their glasses. Politicians smile too wide and speak into cameras. At the center sits Cato Mensima, 60 today, proud and careful, the kind of man who makes people lower their voices when he turns. Zuri slips in by the side gate, heart beating hard, holding a leather album close. The leather is worn at the edges like a secret that has been carried too long. Zuri takes one step, then another, eyes on Cato, ready to say the words saved for years. Before a greeting can escape, Abina glides across the floor, perfume sharp, dress catching the light like fish scales. She leans in, not close enough to touch, but close enough to cut. "You don't belong here," she says, clear enough for the nearest tables to hear. Laughter flutters like birds startled from a tree. A waiter looks down at his tray. A woman in gold presses record on her phone. Two young men from a blog raise their cameras and whisper, "Who is that?" Zuri's grip tightens on the album. The room tilts. The band tries to lift the mood with a brighter riff and fails. Cato turns at the sound of Zuri's name in a murmur, confusion crossing his face, then something like fear. Zuri lifts their chin, breathes in the pepper and jasmine air, and steps forward. Night light glows on the garden, but Zuri's mind keeps slipping to Kasoa Flats, to a small room with a window that's stuck in the rains. An aunt with strong hands and a soft scarf taught Zuri to fold clothes in neat squares and to stir banku without burning the pot. Abina had chosen a different life, smooth and high, where a smile could close doors and a title could cover a wound. People called it grace. Zuri knew it was distance. In those early years, a driver came sometimes, never entering the compound, always parking 2 streets away. He handed over brown envelopes that smelled of petrol and paper. "For school," he said, eyes on the steering wheel. Inside were crisp sadies and short notes in a careful hand, lessons tucked between coins. "Do your best. Be kind. I am proud of you." Zuri kept every note. At school, fees got paid. At home, the aunt hid the envelopes in a tin of powdered milk under the bed. Zuri learned to grow tall without taking up space. Meanwhile, across town, Abina arranged centerpieces and lives. She smiled for magazine covers and built a picture that never bent. The house was glass and white floors, the children were Selassie and Nima, polished and gentle, taught to stand straight and speak soft. Zuri watched from far away, a list of birthdays learned by heart and never spoken aloud. When the party came, Zuri should have received an invitation. It never arrived. Later someone whispered that it was sent, then, lost, then, maybe the address was wrong, and the lie shone like a clean plate. Zuri did not argue. Zuri came anyway. The leather album under one arm, a small flash drive in a pocket, a phone full of voice notes, a calm that looked like ice but felt like fire. There were receipts, each with dates and amounts, each signed by the same steady hand. There were letters with the same slant in the G and the loop in the Y. There was a recording of Abina's assistant saying, "Please do not send anything to that address again." There was another of the driver explaining that he was told to use side roads and to never say who sent him. The truth smelled like petrol, sharp and real, the way it filled your nose at dawn on the Kasoa road. Zuri had carried it for years, careful as glass, waiting for a night like this. In the garden, where lights blinked and lies smiled, Zuri's steps were slow and sure. The album felt heavy, the flash drive felt small, but together they felt enough. Tonight, the pretty picture would meet the proof. Tonight, silence would end. The room tightened around table 7 like a held breath. The MC, a smooth man with a good suit and an easier smile, leaned in and said something the way people say small storms will pass. He offered Zuri a joke that landed soft, like paper, and when that did not calm the air he switched to polite insults, the kind that make a person doubt their ears. "Perhaps you've lost your invitation," he said loud enough for cameras to catch the line, and laughter spilled the way coins do when someone drops a tray. The PR manager at Cato's elbow moved like a shadow. She touched the host's arm and pointed, not with her finger but with the set of her shoulders, toward two men who looked too solid to be guests. They stood and folded their arms. Someone in a navy suit checked his watch as if time could fix a moment. Abina leaned close to the bandleader. Her voice was a whisper but full of command. "Play louder," she told him, and the drummer tightened his hands on the sticks. The trumpets answered with an upbeat riff meant to shove trouble into the gaps between songs. Phones rose like a field of small suns. A blogger mouthed the words into a camera. Comments appeared on a live stream in real time. Drama at table 7. Who is she? Is that Cato's child? The noise amplified the small violence of Abina's earlier line. Cato sat between taste and reputation, the two of them heavy on his chest. He watched Zuri and then the band and then the faces at each table. His jaw worked like someone putting a lid on a kettle that still hissed. Shame ran through him and then something colder, a quick fear for the way headlines eat men. He looked away for a second as if blinking could hide the evidence of his hands. Zuri felt each movement from feet through a spine that had learned to carry more than it seemed able to hold. Zuri's breath came in even counts. There was a promise in the steady that had kept Zuri alive all these years, a vow not to run when running would make pain small and private again. The promise had been spoken to an empty room, under the thin light of a kerosene lamp, and it tasted like iron in the mouth the way truth sometimes does. Zuri folded that promise over like a map and stepped into the band of light that fell across the stage. The leather album was warm under one arm, the pages pressed tight with a life that would not be erased. In the other hand the flash drive was small enough to hide in a palm but heavy with sound and paper and the names that would not be changed. The crowd leaned forward without meaning to. The drummer counted out a bar that no one heard because every eye had turned to Zuri and the moment made a little hollow in the room where hesitation could not live. Glasses rose across the garden and the sound was bright and polite. Zuri stood with the leather album under one arm and the flash drive in the other. For a second the room seemed to hold its breath the way a pool holds water before a splash. Zuri put a hand on the microphone and said, soft but clear, "1 minute for the man who taught me kindness from the shadows." The words landed like a coin on a table and rolled, making small noises everywhere. Abina snapped, sharp as a crack, "Mic off." People laughed the way people laugh when they do not know how to look at pain. The MC tried to smile and speak over Zuri, but his voice felt thin. The bandleader tightened his jaw and the drummer waited, sticks raised. Zuri did not stumble. They reached into the pocket, found the flash drive, and slipped it into the DJ deck like something too small to matter that suddenly became the whole room. For a beat nothing happened and then the LED wall burst alive. Photos slid across the screen one after another like pages turned too fast. There were tuition receipts with dates and numbers, letters folded with care, notes with loops in the same handwriting Cato used to write, "Be brave," at the bottom of school reports. A photo lingered of a small boy in a cap and gown, smiling too big, with an empty row in the front where a father might have stood. Whispers sharpened and pointed at each picture. Phones went up, faces lit by screens, fingers typing into comment boxes. Someone near the head table made a sound like a small animal in a trap. Cato's face changed color slowly, like cloth soaking up rain. He leaned forward until his knuckles went white on the table. The notes on the screen had his name in a hand people usually kept for private things. Abina's laugh fell away and her smile tightened into something hollow. She stood, hands moving, trying to cover the light with a palm. A waiter stepped forward, and the PR woman mouthed to the DJ to cut the feed, but the images kept coming. A receipt showed the bank account and the stamp of the branch where Cato's driver once waited at dusk. A voice clip mattered more than any speech because it was small and true. When a short audio played, it was Abina's assistant saying, "Do not let anything to that address reach her." The room shifted like paper in wind. People leaned in to catch the next thing. Zuri's voice was calm enough that the calm felt like a risk. He paid quietly, they said, and he did it out of love. The toast had been meant to celebrate 60 years of a man's life, but now the taste left in people's mouths was not wine. It was smoke. Abina did not wait. She crossed the room like a woman who had rehearsed anger in front of a mirror. Her heels clicked and the sound cut through the low hum of phones and the drum beat. She reached the stage, snatched the microphone from Zuri's hand, and said it again, louder this time, as if the first time had been a practice. "You do not belong here," she spat, and the words hit the tables like cold water. A hush ran across the crowd. The band froze in the middle of a measure and even the glasses stopped their small clink. Cameras swung on her, lenses bright and hungry. Abina's face was pale with something like fury and shame braided together. Zuri watched without blinking. Their face did not change. They did not step back or raise a hand. For a beat it seemed the whole garden held its breath. Then Zuri reached calmly, took the mic back, and said, plain as a fact that could not be argued, "I belong wherever my father's love paid the bill." The sentence fell into the quiet and landed solid. People leaned forward. Some mouths opened. A man at the next table muttered, "My God." Zuri did not stop there. They slid the album onto the lectern, opened it, and let the pages face the room. Then they said the thing everyone would remember. "If I do not belong," Zuri said, voice steady and cold, "then return every sadi he sent. Start with your wedding ring." The word seemed to make the air heavier. There was a sound like a flipped page and then a bright flash on the LED wall. A close-up of a bank transfer appeared, showing the same account that had sent the tuition notes and the driver's envelopes. Then a photo of Abina placing her hand over a sparkling ring at a ribbon cutting, the caption showing a receipt paid from that same account. Gasps broke out like someone lighting matches across the room. Chairs scraped back. Someone cried, "No," the band went silent, as if someone had pressed a pause button on the night. Cato pushed his chair away slowly. His face was small in his hands for a second, and then he looked up as if seeing his family for the first time. The cameras kept rolling, and the live stream filled with shocked faces and angry comments. Selassie and Nima stood too, their smiles gone and their hands trembling. Abina's allies around the table sank into themselves, mouths moving without sound. The PR manager made a quick, useless motion toward the stage. The drummer rested his sticks on his knee and could not play. For a moment the garden was not a party. It was a court where truth had walked in and taken a seat. Zuri closed the album gently and tucked the flash drive back into their pocket as if the instruments of proof were ordinary things. They looked at Cato and held his gaze until he stood. The man who had hidden love in envelopes could not hide anymore. The music did not start again that night. La hush settled after the shock, but Zuri did not stop. They tapped the phone and a short clip played through the speakers. Abina's voice was crisp and ordinary, the kind you hear when someone gives an order. "Do not let anything reach that address," the clip said, and then a quieter line, colder, "She is a stain to be scrubbed." The words landed like stones. Conversations died. Phones still recorded. People who had been laughing 10 seconds before felt their faces go slack. The guests could not unhear it. A man by the buffet whispered a curse. The live stream exploded with comments. Zuri set the phone down and then looked at the room like it was a map they had learned by heart. Ya, the cousin who kept the family papers, stood up slowly. He had a lawyer's calm, a notebook that smelled like ink. He walked to the stage and without drama said the things that mattered. He confirmed a paternity acknowledgement written in Cato's hand that had never been filed. He spoke of a trust account created for school fees and medical bills, an account Zuri had no access to and did not know about until now. He named dates and branches and small details that made the receipts breathe. The words moved through the crowd the way a wind moves through leaves. Cato's shoulders shook. He reached for a napkin and could not stop the wet running down his face. He stood and for the first time in decades he called Zuri by the old nickname he had never used in public. It was small, private, the kind of name that holds a lifetime of soft things. When Cato said it, something in the room changed. People who had been on Abina's side blinked and looked away. Her allies at the main table sank lower into their chairs, folding themselves into the cloth as if the table could swallow them. Some tried to make small noises of protest but the sounds were thin and failed to fill the air. Selassie and Nima covered their mouths and looked at each other like children who had been told one secret and then another. The PR manager shook her head and mouthed that they needed to control the narrative. The security guards kicked at the floor with their shoes like men who had suddenly lost their purpose. Outside, the bloggers fed the feed faster and messages multiplied into a small storm. Zuri did not gloat. They moved with the quiet of someone who had carried truth a long way and finally set it down. They opened the album again and let the pages face anyone who still doubted. Letters, receipts, and the clipped audio sat plain as facts. Cato took Zuri's hand and did not let go. Abina stood very still, her face losing its carefully painted color, and then she turned away. The garden felt emptied of its old music. People whispered, not to gossip but to record memory. Tonight was no longer a celebration. It had become evidence that some things can be hidden and some things will find light. Zuri folded the album shut and pushed back from the lectern as if they were offering the room one last chance to change the story. Money was placed on a side table by a man who thought an envelope could fix what had been broken, but Zuri did not reach for it. They looked at the bills like they were a dull kind of promise and said, calm and loud enough for cameras and cousins, I do not want money. I want my name said in public and a real place at the table. No apology tokens. No staged photos. I want a seat where I can be seen. The words landed and moved through the crowd. For a moment people thought Zuri might demand revenge or walk away rich, but what came next felt older and truer than anger. Cato, who had sat with his face folded in his hands, was brought a sheet of paper. The PR woman had already set it up with lawyers and signatures, a public note that could have been written by anyone. Cato reached for the pen with hands that trembled like a man carrying fragile things across a river. He read the short statement aloud, voice breaking on small words, and then he wrote his name. He wrote the private nickname he had only used by candlelight and in whisper. He spoke Zuri's full name into the microphone with a sound like a door opening. When he signed, the room shifted. Selassie and Nima stood slowly. They had been taught to believe neat stories that fit in glossy magazines. They walked across the floor like people who had been given new glasses and then saw the world differently. At the lectern they told Zuri, with faces raw and honest, that they had been lied to too. Abina had fed them versions of the past that kept the house calm and the guests impressed. Selassie said she had been told Zuri belonged to a rumor. Nima said she had been shown pictures where the front row was always full and never empty. Their apologies were small and true, not the kind meant for cameras but the kind that warmed the skin. The guests who had gathered to watch the spectacle stopped being an audience and became witnesses. Phones were still in hands, live streams still running, but the room felt like a place that had been asked to notice. People who had sat on the fence moved their chairs closer. Old friends wiped their faces. The PR team tried to frame the moment, but there was nothing to spin. Cato held Zuri's hand on stage while the band played a soft, simple song someone chose because it fit the room now. Abina stayed a step behind, silent, ring gone from her finger and heavy maybe in a pocket or on a table. The talk that would flood feeds in the morning would be about more than scandal. It would be about a man who paid in secret and a child who asked only to be counted. The inheritance that passed that night was not land or title. It was truth. Zuri handed the microphone back to the bandleader and said, soft and steady, play something honest. For a second the room waited, then the drums began slow and warm, like a heart finding its own rhythm. People stopped pretending to be polite and let the tune hold them. Cato stood and took Zuri's hand as if he had always meant to, and they moved together in a circle of light for the first time. The dance was small and awkward at first, and then something gentler took over. Photographers leaned in, shutters like rain, and every phone in the garden lifted to catch the moment. Around them, faces that had been sharp with gossip found a new shape, quieter and softer. Abina watched from the edge, her hands trembling. She slid a ring off her finger without drama, fingers numb, and walked away into the dark where the lanterns threw long, thin shadows. No one followed. On the head table the leather album lay open, the empty front row filled now by pictures and notes that made the space whole. Someone at a corner table posted the video with a short line, "Belonging isn't gifted. It's proven." Within minutes the caption had spread like a bright stain, picked up by small accounts and then larger ones. Comments poured in with names and memories, with anger and with sighs, with people saying they had been lied to and people saying they had seen the same thing in their own homes. By morning the clip had moved beyond the garden. It was on feeds in Accra and beyond, talked about on morning shows and shared by strangers who wrote, "Thank you," and by others who said, "This is my family too." The band played on while Kato and Zuri finished their dance. It was not about celebration anymore. It was about something cleaner, a father who could no longer hide and a child who would no longer be invisible. The night closed with drums slowing and phones still glowing, holding a small, sharp new story that would not be put back into a neat box.